Man, guess who's back? I said, guess who's back? So, the curse of David Haye lives on. Is stronger than ever. He really has power in his words. David Haye said in an interview that he backs Eubank Jr. to get the decision. And as we've seen with David Haye's former predictions, he's just, I don't know if it's witchcraft or what's happening, but David Haye should not speak about fights. I actually think that David Haye is the best pundit out there for his analysis. But when he gives his predictions, it's always the opposite. And it's actually quite funny. So where do we start? I really didn't see this coming like a lot of people. I thought this being, a fight where it might go to a decision and Eubank winning a majority decision. And that was actually a credit to Liam Smith, because I always knew Liam Smith was tough, like I said in the previous video. Unlike some people, I knew it wasn't going to be a walk in the park for Chris Eubank Jr. I've seen Smith fight for many years. I've seen his performances. He's had solid performances against Vargas and the former champion and a lot of different fighters. The only person who really made him look below par was Canelo, and there's no shame in losing to Canelo. I feel like there is a pattern that is kind of emerging, and there's a pattern of two different types of fighters: boxers and punchers. The boxers are often fighters that have had a long amateur career, and they establish themselves by the experience that they've got in the amateur careers, and they have like solid fundamentals, like Smith, like Lomachenko, like Usyk, Golovkin, all these people who've got this solid base, this solid amateur career behind them. They often go on to do really well, and they age really well in the sport. But fighters like Chris Eubank Jr., who didn't have such a good long amateur career, and kind of shortened their amateur career and turned professional too quickly, they pay a price. They pay a price with their fundamentals, and in the end they get found out. And it's always at the hands of someone who has had an extensive amateur career, who've been able to hone their skills properly. That's what I've found to be the case. And these fighters, we often call them well-skilled. Even if they weren't top tier, even if they don't have great power and great knockouts, they're not, amazing talents. We often recognize their boxing skills. And this is due to this long amateur career where there is constantly drilled into them, their footwork and their movement and everything. Getting your head off the center line, excuse me, your distance control. It's all taught in this amateur period. And the more extensive this period is, the more experience, the better the fighter, the longer the fighter lasts in the pro game. And I just think that you can't buy experience. You have to go through the whole learning curve. If you just look at, like I said before, the likes of Floyd Mayweather, started boxing from a young age, had quite a long amateur career, but although his amateur career wasn't so long, but he'd been boxing since he was a small kid and trained by one of the best trainers of all time. So he was always, he knew everything, Floyd Mayweather. But if you just look at some other fighters, for example, like I said, Usyk is just a solid fighter. There's nothing that you can say that he does massively wrong. There's nothing. Lomachenko, the same. Their footwork is great. Their timing is great. Their composure under pressure is great. They know when to slip. They know when to counter. They know when to get their head off the center line. They know when to take a break. They know how to when to put their foot on the gas, when to take their foot off the gas. All that stuff is learned in the amateurs. Their defense, tight guard. They know all this stuff. And if you watch them, they're just solid fighters. They become 3-4 weight world champions, undisputed. If you look at the likes of Terence Crawford, solid amateur career. Look at what he's done. Or it's either people who had a solid amateur career or people who started boxing very early. Gervonta Davis started boxing when he was like, I don't know, 6 years old. You see him fighting as a 7-year-old, you know, and you look at his skills. This is really when you hone your skills through this amateur period. Now, if you look at the people who didn't have much of an amateur career, but they had a lot of talent, they often have a meteoric rise, very sudden. If you look at Deontay Wilder, knocking out everybody, as soon as they come up against that high tier competition, and this is always someone who has had an extensive amateur career, they come unstuck. Because you have to pay the price somewhere. This is how life is. You have to pay the price somewhere. You either pay it at the beginning when you're making no money and you're struggling as an amateur, or you take a quick shortcut and you beat a few people just based on heart and talent, natural ability, and then you fall on your face, basically, when you come up against someone who has got those traditional skills. That's what I find often happens. The likes of Errol Spence had a long amateur career. We don't need to say much about what he's accomplished. He barely gets hit. And that's all down to the repetition of those fundamentals at the amateur level. Now, if we take a look at the fighters who kind of rushed their progression into the pro game, like I said before, they have a meteoric rise and then they fall when the pressure gets too much. And basically, you can't really buy this experience. It's one of these things you have to learn at a young age to really get muscle memory with it. You can get a trainer that can teach you how to do it, but if you haven't had it ingrained into you and had like lots of fights where you've actually put what you learned from the trainer into practice, you just come unstuck. And this is kind of what I'm seeing with Eubank Jr. He never had an extensive amateur career, and he came into the pro game and he never really knew how to box. But he had a lot of talent, so he would come forward, he'd put pressure, big swinging punches. He missed a lot of them. He took a lot of punches because he's got a good chin, and he beat a few people, but he didn't really beat anybody. He didn't really beat any notable fighters. James DeGale is probably the only notable fighter that I can remember Chris Eubank beating that I thought that was a really good win. That was the time I thought maybe he has got some talent to be able to beat the top guys. But at the same time, James DeGale was at the end of his career. Apart from that, who else has Eubank really beat? Eubank, just like Liam Smith said, has probably got by on the Eubank name with his dad, who also wasn't really a great fighter. When Eubank Senior stepped up a division, when he stepped up in competition, he also lost. He also had some embarrassing losses as well. I know I don't want to take anything away from Chris Eubank Senior. He achieved a lot, becoming a champion, beating Nigel Benn. But apart from that, it was a similar story. I think underachievers, maybe, the Eubanks. But yeah, not to go off too much on a tangent. Eubank just stuck between two different styles. I preferred when he was coming forward, attacking aggressively. I preferred that style, but that style had problems as well because he got found out multiple times. When he fought Billy Joe Saunders, he really put him under pressure and he was coming on strong, but Billy Joe Saunders' boxing skills, that amateur career, that amateur thing coming through again, found out Eubank. Eubank couldn't really box, so that's why he lost. But it was close, and that's why everyone still had faith in Eubank being a good fighter and an aggressive fighter. He then came up against George Groves, who Eubank thought, again, he would have no chance. I think this arrogant thing is always creeping into his mindset, but he thought George Groves would have no chance against him, just like he thought Billy Joe Saunders would have no chance against him. Found out that that wasn't the case. Even so, Chris Eubank Jr. came forward, swinging shots, and he was very tough, and he was very determined. And I think that's why people thought, well, he clearly hasn't got boxing skills. He needs to improve his boxing skills massively. But that heart and that tenacity still gave people this hope that Eubank Jr., or not even this hope, but the belief that Eubank Jr. has some skills that can get him to the top. And this is why it's carried on like this. He's had 2 big losses at the top. Every time he's stepped up, twice he's lost. But people still have this faith in him, and I'm one of those people. And then he stepped up now. He's had time in the ring. He didn't look that good against Liam Williams. He didn't, honestly. But he still dropped him a lot of times. And so people was like, okay, well, it wasn't the fight that they thought, but he dropped him. Maybe this new style, this development in his boxing skills is going to see him transcend, to the top. So he comes up against Liam Smith now. And it all goes wrong. He's stuck between 2 different styles. Roy Jones Jr., who is not proven as a trainer, definitely proven as a fighter, but definitely not as a trainer. I think that showed as well. Is teaching him this open guard kind of boxing off the back foot with the lead left jab, trying to set up the right hand. Totally different from how Eubank fights. It was working. He had a lot of success. I liked what he was doing, but it seemed as if he can't marry the two. He needs to marry his aggressive front foot style with this defensive back foot style, and he just hasn't really been able to do it, and he's ended up getting stuck in the middle, which is the worst place to be. Absolute worst place to be, stuck between 2 styles of fighting. Aggressive front foot, he hasn't been able to marry the two, and this is what's found him out each time. Each time he stepped up. This was an embarrassing fight. We'll just talk about what happened. He was doing well. He was working the jab. He was moving. Same way he was fighting Liam Williams. It's the same way that he fought Smith. He was jabbing, but Smith was getting closer. He had the tight guard. He was cutting off the ring. He was making Eubank work. And a lot of these jabs and punches were landing on the glove, although some of his Eubank's punches were getting through. But Smith never really looked that bothered. He was getting closer. And second round, third round, second round was a good round, I think, for Smith. Third round was a good round for Eubank. Eubank caught him clean, and then he started to come forward with these uppercuts and these hooks, and that is when we saw the old Eubank Jr. And I liked that. But the old Eubank Jr. would have piled on the pressure, would have carried on when he was on the inside, throwing those hooks, throwing those jabs, and the old Eubank Jr. would have just piled on the pressure, kept going forward, throwing those shots, landing those body shots, uppercuts, everything. But this new version of Eubank, he took his foot off the gas after landing those shots. He was right in where he needed to be, took his foot off the gas, went back on the back foot. This is the Roy Jones style, and gave Liam Smith the chance to advance again. You just open yourself up to attacks when you're on the back foot and your defense is not that good, and Smith just took advantage of that, caught him with a shot as he was trying to kind of get out of the way, and Eubank just crumbled. Now, it's not the hardest shot I've seen Eubank take. Eubank's got a great chin when he's rehydrated properly, and that's another issue. He didn't really look good. He didn't look like he was rehydrated properly. I think there's an issue with him coming down from 168. It's not that he was coming down, but he's fought at 168 and then having to cut down to 160 pounds middleweight again. I'm not sure what he weighed in the ring, what his rehydration, but he just didn't look great. When he actually got hit, he looked good when he was moving. He looked fast, but when he got hit with the first meaningful shot, he was out of it. His legs went to Bambi, and his punch resistance was gone. And he hasn't been in so many wars where, his punch resistance is gone because of his chin. I think it's more to do with how he cut the weight. Maybe he is better at 168. I think his performances were way better at 168. So I'm confused at where Chris Eubank really is at the moment. Is it the end of his career? I don't think it's out of limits. I don't think it's off limits to say that this may be it. This may be his career finished. It's not off limits to say that, because he speaks so highly of himself, but he doesn't deliver. Disappointing performance from Eubank. Great performance from Smith. Eubank, although he was doing well early on in the fight, he was always open. He was very open to this kind of thing happening. There was no tight guard, and when you do fight with an open guard, this is what can happen. Happened to a lot of people with athleticism, but an open guard. David Haye comes to mind. David Haye was obliterating everyone early on in his career. Came up against Thompson with that open guard and got slept. And then later on in his career against Bellew, the same thing, open guard. Lost to the better boxer in Tony Bellew. There's lots of examples of this. Even Roy Jones himself, who's training Eubank, the same thing. Roy Jones had an open guard early on in his career where he was very athletic. He was able to use that to his advantage. Later on in his career, when his athleticism kind of declined, or when he kind of stepped up in competition, he got caught. Got caught by Tava, got caught by a few people, and same thing happened. This same style, this open guard style, this is the disadvantage of having this Roy Jones style. It only takes one punch to get through, and this is what happens. You get crumpled like a bad suit. Embarrassing. Where does Chris Eubank go from here? I think he should change trainers, but that never looks good. It never looks good to lose a fight and change trainer. But I think that's probably what he needs. I don't think it's working for him. I think he should change trainer and try to find someone who can emphasize his attributes, his aggressive, come forward style, his energy, that ferocity that he's got. I think that needs to be emphasized, and I don't think he does well when he's taught a completely different style, a style that's completely different to how he likes to fight. He's good coming forward, being aggressive, throwing those hard shots, those fast shots, and just basically using his athleticism aggressively, not defensively. And in my view, he desperately needs a trainer that can bring that back. Just a more refined version. That's all it is. He didn't need a whole change in his style just because he had those 2 losses at the beginning, early on in his career. He just needed his style to be refined. All these different trainers like Roy Jones are trying to teach him something completely different. It's just not working for him. If he's going to train in America, since he was with Roy Jones, I think he should carry on training in America. Find somebody else. Maybe Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach would be a great trainer for him. That style would be perfect for him. But there are other trainers who could teach him this, who could complement his natural aggressive style. The other thing is, does he even have it anymore? Did he have it in the first place? If he is taught how to optimize his natural aggressive come forward style, does he still lose? I don't know. I'm not sure. I do think he has some talent because I saw it against DeGale, but even against DeGale, it wasn't a great performance. I can't actually put my finger on a great performance from him. He talks a lot more than he actually does, and his confidence or arrogance is a lot more than his ability. This is the problem. I don't think he retires, but he's not exactly a spring chicken. We'll have to see what happens. In regards to David Haye's prediction, the curse of David Haye is in full force. You know what's funny? I used to think it was a joke. David Haye has just got a whole bunch of predictions wrong. Anything that David Haye said is the opposite, and everyone makes a joke of it, and it's a common thing in boxing. But I actually think there's something to it now. This is really going too far. I mean, there is really some serious power in David Haye's predictions. Anything he says, it's the opposite. It's like a witchcraft or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they say there's power in the spoken tongue. But in the case of David Haye, there is definitely power in his spoken tongue. If I was a fighter, no matter how confident I am of winning, I would tell David Haye, please don't make a prediction on my fight, You know, he says Chris Eubank is going to win this fight. And then now we have Chris Eubank Jr. knocked out in the 4th round. Let me know what you think. Should he carry on? Should he retire? The Golovkin fight slips away. Should Smith give him a rematch? Does he need a rematch? Should Smith go on and fight Golovkin? I think Smith should go on and fight Golovkin because I think this is the best chance for Smith to really make his name. I think Smith looked great. He hasn't slipped or declined in any way. And Golovkin has definitely slipped and declined. So I think Smith should get him right now. Smith is hot. Golovkin is not. And I think he should get him right now and win those belts, win that big fight. You know, I think now is the time. The iron is hot for Smith. For Eubank, I don't know what he does. Let me know what you think Eubank should do next. Where does he go from here? I'm on to the next one.
Man, guess who's back? I said, guess who's back?
If you enjoyed the video today, please don't forget to like, share, leave a comment, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.